You're listening to I Don't Do That, a lifestyle podcast with me, Ocho. I get to talk to lots of different people about all the things that they don't do, and you get to hear what they say. Na 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 na, yeah, no, I don't do that. No, I don't do that. You know it's alright, you can ask, but I don't do that. No, I don't do that. I don't do that. I don't do that. Episode 7.
Every time I find myself in a position of discomfort or whatever you want to call it, then it's like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm traveling. I'm not in the same place where I was before. And I like that.
Episode 7 is I Don't Live in My Home Country. We're joined in the studio with Jose, who does not live in his home country. Jose is a radio and podcast host. You can find his show at clandestinoradio.org. That's CLANDESTINO radio.org. He is in his mid-30s. He identifies his gender as male and his ethnicity as Andean from the Andes Mountains. Jose, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So you don't live in the city where you grew up, and you don't live in the country where you grew up.
Yeah, I used to live in my home country, in my city, where I was born and raised.
Okay.
And I first left it when I was 17, and I
And what
moved
city
to
was that?
Germany. From La Paz.
Okay.
La Paz, Bolivia.
Yeah.
Very high altitude
Yeah.
city. They say it's the highest capital of the world, but I correct people because it's not technically a capital.
All right.
It's the seat of the government, and that's why people think it's the capital.
And Bolivia has 2 capital cities, am I right about
Right.
that? Yeah.
So the historical capital would be Sucre, which is
Okay.
a small city in the south that no one's ever even heard of it.
Uh-huh.
But it's a beautiful city. I've been there once, and it's very small and pretty.
Uh-huh. And I'm guessing that, I don't know, are there other countries that have 2 national capitals?
I think so. I
Okay.
mean, some friends and my son would know better, but I think there's 1 or 2 that
Yeah.
have a similar issue where they moved the government to a different city later on, and now there's 2 or something like that.
Right. So you were born in La Paz and you moved to Germany? And when did you move?
So I was born in La Paz, raised in El Alto, which would be the city next to it, kind of like Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Sure.
And then after finishing high school, when I was 17 still, I volunteered for a program in Germany. And I spent a year over there. And then after that year, I went back to La Paz for college for about 3 years. And then after that, I moved to the States. And
So moving to Germany, now, you speak, how many languages do you speak? You don't have to be great at them, but how many
around
can you speak?
6
Yeah?
or
All right.
7, yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Okay. And so did you speak German when you went to Germany, or did you learn it there? Or?
Not really. I studied it there.
Okay.
It was like a month of biweekly classes. And then
Had
I
you
was
had any exposure to it, to the language?
not before.
Okay. Wow.
I was intimidated by it.
Yeah.
And yeah, but then I was there and I was working, and I
And
had
you
to
were
learn it
17?
when I first went, yeah.
Okay.
I remember my 18th birthday, I was camping in a forest in southern Germany, and
Wow.
I had a beer for the first time while being in Germany
Yeah.
on my birthday.
Wow.
That's
Is that the Black Forest you hear about?
It was actually very close to that area, yeah.
Whoa. That's a great time to have your
Not
first
really.
beer, man.
No, it wasn't my first beer. It was
Oh.
my first German beer
Okay,
in Germany.
Okay. Yeah. That's a great time to have your first German beer.
While camping, yeah. I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah. First beer is probably a different story. So you were doing like school in Germany for a year? Was that kind of how that works? Or?
No, I was working.
You were working.
I was
Okay.
working, yeah. Different jobs, different things, learning.
Okay. And what is it that brought you there?
I went through an organization that I was part of at the time, and
Okay.
yeah, we can talk about that later on a different.
Okay. 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 So there's an organization that sent you to Germany, and you worked there for a year, and then you came back to La Paz for college.
Yeah. For 3 years, I did 1 year of communications and journalism, and that's where I got my first taste of radio.
Yeah.
And I started volunteering for radio over there as well, doing news. And then the year after that, I decided to join the seminary because I was very involved in my church at the time. And that year,
This is a Catholic church?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So in the seminary, I studied philosophy for a year.
Okay.
And during that period, I decided that was not going to be the path for me.
All right. Nothing like
And-
philosophy to teach you what you think about things, I suppose.
Oh, I still love philosophy. I
Yeah.
love reading it and discussing things and
Yeah.
ideas.
I still have a Kierkegaard book of
Nice.
yours. Yeah.
Nice. He's one of my favorites, I was
Yeah.
going to say.
All right.
But then, and then I went back to journalism, communications for another year. And then at that point, I had the choice of going to visit some friends in Argentina or going to visit some friends in the States.
Right.
And I decided to come to the States, and 13 years later, here we are.
Okay. So still back in the States.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how did you know the people in the States?
So I had met people when I was in Germany from
Okay.
all over the world.
I see, I see.
I had roommates from Poland and India, and we had events with girls from Minnesota and
Right.
other states, and
Right. And you did so that I'm in my mind now, that's where you started like being a world citizen because you met people from all over the world there.
I had met people from all over the world in La Paz before,
Okay.
but I would say you're right,
Okay.
because that was my first experience outside of my country.
Right.
And I didn't know that certain things are done differently in other countries. Like
Right.
most people who don't leave their countries don't think about certain things.
Yeah. What was something that surprised you about Germany?
I really like their recycling system.
Okay.
Because there was a bin for everything, for plastics, for paper, for glass, and everything was scheduled. And at least at the time when I was there, everything used to be on time, including trains and everything.
Yeah.
Now that's not the case anymore. But
Right.
But back then I was just amazed by the punctuality in general by everybody. And growing up in Bolivia, I always felt out of place in that sense because I was the one who was punctual always.
Huh.
And I would be stood up by my friends, like,
Yeah.
regularly.
Uh-huh.
And not just my friends, like everybody, even official things. But I see a lot of that here too. I think it's like an American problem. It's like not being punctual, about things in
So
general.
you see people in the United States not being punctual,
Yeah.
similar to Bolivians maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not being on. I call it on the clock. Just
Right.
not being on the clock,
Yeah.
on the grid. I personally like to show up on time for things, and I do a pretty good job at it. But the only reason that I say I like to is for other people.
Yeah.
it's not. It's not because I like to.
That's for me. That's the thing.
Sure.
It's a sign of respect,
Yeah.
And in Germany, like if you're 5 minutes late, that's disrespectful.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
people will not wait that long.
Yeah, yeah.
So-
And that's interesting because I would have thought that the evaluation of the U.S. would be that we're more on time and more punctual and on the clock, but no. Yeah,
we call it Bolivian time, but
yeah.
I call it Bolivian time anywhere.
But you were more German anyway. Like from the time you were growing up, you were just always more reliable as far as punctuality is concerned. And
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I would call that German, but
No.
yeah, maybe more square, I guess.
Yeah. I remember one time we were driving and there was a sign that said like, this place was the next left or the next right. And
And it wasn't.
It wasn't. No, there was actually like a driveway before that or something. And you were like, man, if we were in Germany, that would actually be the next left. That sign would be 10 feet over there because everyone would just turn into this driveway because that's what it means. You know? So,
yeah, that's something I noticed
Yeah.
coming here.
Yeah.
And it pissed me off for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Now I'm just over it. I'm just not thinking about it.
Yeah. 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 That's an interesting thing. That's probably a different discussion, but so what else is different from the U.S., would you say?
So are we talking about like Germany and Bolivia?
Germany, Bolivia, U.S., and you've lived in Australia for
So for some time, yeah.
a couple of years maybe, or
well, no, not really. It was more during the pandemic
right,
time.
it was a visit that
it was
got extended.
Yes,
Yeah.
unplanned.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that was also interesting. But I guess about the States, and more in particular about Minnesota and the Midwest, because
Right.
I've also lived in San Francisco, and it's like that doesn't count, you know.
Right.
But like over here, it's just the distances for everything and the lack of public transport.
Yeah.
You know, those are things
The
that
distances between buildings and
pop up right away, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, oh, why can't I just like get a bus to
right.
go to North Mankato or St. Peter?
Yeah, yeah.
But no, it's not the case. I mean, I see that there are more things happening now than 10 years ago.
Sure.
But still, we're miles away from the public transport in Europe.
Right.
You know, when I first came to the States, I had a connecting flight in Miami. And I was like, oh, I could just stay in Miami and then continue by train all the way to Minnesota.
Yeah.
But, you know, looking at that possibility, it's so crazy expensive and
Yeah.
it wouldn't really work.
I want to take 1 second to thank everyone who's been kind enough to make a donation to the podcast. Even if you're just giving a few dollars a month, it really does help keep the lights on around here. And if you're interested in making a contribution, you can do that at idon'tdothatpodcast.com/give. That's idon'tdothatpodcast.com/give. Now back to the show.
The food
Yeah.
is huge. And in fact, it just reminded me of a commercial that there was in Bolivia about they show this guy from Germany eating typical German food, and then the next day they show the guy eating typical German food, and it's the same food and it's the same plate.
Sure.
And that happens like
Sure.
over a period of days, and then they show the counterpart, which would be, you know, anywhere in South America. It's like in Bolivia we have like, I don't know, 40 or 50 typical dishes, like,
Sure.
you know, from different regions and different ingredients, and you can find any and all of those, including international food in the city. And so people are used to just a lot of variety in their food and tastes and flavor, and so going to Germany, that was an experience similar to here, where there's, I would say, not less variety, but the varieties are less accessible to most people,
Sure.
you know.
Like in Germany, like you could get international food, but it's harder to find it, or it's more expensive or something.
Yeah, or just in general, if you want to eat organically, for example, you have to
Right.
pay a lot. You have to go to expensive co-ops
Yeah.
and so on. And whereas in Bolivia, you never hear the word organic because we don't have GMOs.
Right.
So everything is organic.
Everything's
and-
organic.
And everything is cheap and big and tasty, and people are just used to that. You know?
Climate's got to be better for growing food, right?
Oh, well, yeah, of course, yeah.
I mean,
Depending on where you are, but
right.
yeah, for sure.
I think of Germany as, I don't know, but I think it's really cold and probably not that hospitable to agriculture.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
And so, yeah.
I'm not trying to make excuses, but I'm trying to maybe explain what some of the difference is. I don't know, in my own head. You know? Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of it is also commercial and,
Uh-huh.
Legal and whatnot.
Sure, sure.
One of those things is the coca leaves that, a lot of friends ask me about how that is in Bolivia, because it's so normal to be in that elevation and to consume coca tea
Sure.
or to chew coca leaves.
Sure.
I was just exposed to that from an early age, and it's normal because people use it medicinally.
Because it's a stimulant, right?
Well, cocaine is, but
Cocaine is.
the coca
and
leaves.
cocaine is made from coca leaves, correct? Or
Right.
Okay.
Right. It's one of the 100 and some alkaloids that there are that are good for you.
Right,
They all
right.
have different things, but you don't really get a high or a rush or anything. I think
Okay.
didn't I give you some coca leaves?
If you did, I don't remember. So, it probably was pretty unremarkable, wasn't it?
I feel so bad because I prepared some to bring it and I forgot.
Some other time.
Next time, I'll bring
Yeah,
some. But yeah, that's the one thing that, if you go to certain markets, certain streets in La Paz, you see the farmers with huge totes full of, kilos of coca leaves. And you can just buy by the pound or whatever.
Yeah.
And
This is all very interesting because, I think people fight wars over that stuff, But I don't know exactly what all the fighting is about.
right.
Necessarily. So I'm not really educated on that, politically. So, yeah.
And it really helps with the altitude sickness. And that's why
Sure.
99% of the people have coca leaves at home. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
If you take that outside of the country, it's illegal. Bringing it to the States, it's illegal.
Right.
I haven't done that, of course.
No, of course not.
But yeah, it's very interesting to see how societies go about certain things, and
Sure.
vice versa would be the cannabis thing, which, living in San Francisco, it's such a normal thing.
Yeah.
People go to the dispensary lounges after work and whatnot. And in Bolivia, you can go to jail if you have a joint. It's quite interesting how the world works.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Yeah, and I know, a lot of people think, their sense of right and wrong gets conflated with what's legal. And so they think, cannabis is wrong or whatever, or or the coca leaves, they should be illegal. That's why they are, because there's something wrong with it, with what people do with them and with consuming them and so on. So yeah, that is pretty interesting that it just kind of matters where you are in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I disagree. I don't think that coca leaf should be illegal.
Sure.
But on the same coin, I don't think cannabis or mushrooms should be illegal either.
Sure.
Because those are things that grow naturally without us doing anything, and they have.
So how do people see you? Do you know? Because when people see you in Minnesota, do they ask you where you're from, or do they see you as different, as a non-white person or as a South American person, or
I think here in the United States in general, I think I'm perceived differently. Obviously, I don't know exactly how people perceive me, but I have a sense of I don't know if it's some level of intimidation that sometimes people feel by my presence.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's because of my height or
Sure.
by my looks.
Sure.
But I've had all kinds of interactions with people. I've had people asking me where I'm from or if I speak English. I've had people talking to me in other languages.
Sure.
So
you've had people assume that you spoke their language.
yeah.
What languages did
Which-
they think you spoke?
Arabic, for example.
Okay.
Yeah. I've had that happen a few times. And
I can see that because now that you say it, but I wouldn't have thought it, I guess, because I knew from the time I met you,
yeah.
that you're from Bolivia, but
Yeah.
sure.
I can say hello, but that's about it.
Yeah.
But it happens obviously more when I grow my beard. If I shave it, it happens less. But I don't know. I think it's funny how sometimes we tend to judge the books by their covers.
Right.
You know, and
Right.
that's one of the reasons why I enjoy busking, for example, because I like to see how people react. There's people that walk away from me. There's people that come and chat. You
Right.
know, there was one time this lady gave some. She was like 30 or 40 feet away from me, and I was just playing guitar, sitting on the ground,
Right.
and she gave some money to her kid. And then the kid came to me as if she was like too scared to approach me, and she had to send the kid. And
Yeah.
I love that. It was so cool.
You thought she didn't want to come say hi, but her
yeah.
kid wasn't scared. So,
Yeah, and then
yeah.
I had a little chat with the kid, and it was really nice.
Yeah. So, have you gone out busking in a lot of different places?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I enjoy busking for the purpose of music, because I feel like if somebody has the right to drive their motorcycle and polluting the airwaves with a lot of noise,
It's really loud, man.
then maybe I have the right to go and play some tunes in the street.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So and then I like to see those reactions. But I've busked in Germany and Czech Republic and
Okay.
Australia and the States and Bolivia. Yeah, it's fun.
You got a favorite place to busk?
That's a good question. I would say people are more open and welcoming and receptive to that kind of thing in Australia.
Okay.
Even though I didn't get to do it a lot because of the pandemic, but
Right.
it was very nicely organized, at least where I was in Melbourne. The city had its own organization and management for buskers, and
Okay.
they would give out permits and organize events for the buskers, which I thought was really nice. Things like that.
Yeah, it almost sounds like maybe it's like a party on the street for buskers or something like that. Like if it's organized and there's events and whatnot.
It can be. I mean,
Yeah.
they're just very organized. They're not gonna let like two guitar players be in the same block, for example. They're gonna try to help them and find better places and whatnot.
So
And
they'll
I
assign
thought
you
that
a
was cool.
spot in Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I've had, for example, in San Francisco, I was busking in an area that was more touristy near the Embarcadero, and there was a police officer that came and he said, "You can't play over here and ask for money." And I said, "But I'm not asking for money. I didn't even have a basket or anything asking for tips. I was just playing."
Right.
And he said, "No, you can't play. You need a permit."
Yeah.
And I said, okay. So I just grabbed my guitar and, went a couple blocks and then went back and I just kept playing. But it was like, it's interesting to see those things again,
Yeah.
as if it was some sort of crime. Like,
Yeah. No, it's certainly not a crime. No.
let's see what else. I miss the culture of events, whether sports related, like going to a stadium for a soccer game, like the adrenaline and the energy tied to it is a lot of fun, and I haven't experienced that over here.
That's in Bolivia you're talking about?
In Bolivia, yeah. And then
so
same with
over
like,
here, the sports, I don't know anything about sports anywhere. But here the sports culture is different too.
well, I'm talking specifically about associated football, which
Sure.
you
You want to
people
see a
call it-
soccer game.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Over
As we
here
say.
it's not
Yeah.
it's not the same.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine going to see a soccer game or associated football game in U.S. is probably pretty lackluster. It's probably not that exciting.
I haven't been to an MLS game.
Okay.
And I want to go see the Loons in their new stadium, but I haven't done that yet. And I don't know if part of it is the distance or the ticket prices.
Right.
But that's another conversation.
Yeah.
The sense of celebration and party in Bolivia is just general and continuous. Like if you go to a restaurant and they start playing some dancing music, you'll see people stand up and start dancing.
Yeah.
Even if it's not a dance club.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just, I don't know. In that sense, it's more fun in a way, even though not everybody likes that.
Yeah. That's more my vibe too. I don't know, maybe you've noticed, but like, yeah, I like getting up and dancing, and it doesn't necessarily matter where I'm at, or like, and I'm not showing off, you know, like some people think I'm showing off or whatever, but
Just enjoying.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's because I feel like it, and it's a great thing to do. So like, yeah, I think
You would enjoy that.
that sounds like a great thing, you know. Yeah, it makes me want to visit Bolivia. Once again, you know, it's just it's the distance and the ticket prices and things like, yeah. Betty and I are talking about going to Ecuador because our friend Wayne is living there. We used to play in a band with him and Eli. Do you remember that band, Rain Dogs?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wayne and his wife have retired to Ecuador.
Oh, cool.
So like, yeah. We were talking about going there to see him like maybe next winter.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, you'll see the Andes if you go.
Yeah. So, did you want to talk about being Andean?
Sure. Because I think a lot of people overlook the altitude aspect, and that's something I tend to forget about as well. But I get reminded of every time I go back, and I get just sick from it.
Oh,
And it's just so hard, and I just regret I went back. And I'm like, I should have just stayed in Mankato. Why did I come back to the altitude?
it's that bad, huh?
It's
really extreme.
Not every time.
How high up are you there?
3,600 meters,
Okay.
which comes to about around 13,000 feet
Okay, yeah, that's
above
high.
sea level.
Yeah,
So it's a little hike, and your body doesn't realize it until like the day after you land there. And then, you know, just taking a couple of steps seems very tiring. And then you get headaches and
it's an oxygen thing. Am I right? Or
Yeah, pretty
pressure
much.
or air pressure or something? I don't know.
yeah, there's less oxygen in the air because of the
Yeah,
pressure.
sure.
So your body has a harder time processing everything.
All right.
So it's just working
Yeah.
a little bit harder to
Yeah.
keep up. And
You studied biology, so I assume you know more than me about it.
well, so they say. I have a paper that says that, but yeah, I wouldn't say I know a lot.
Right. Okay.
I know a little bit.
Yeah. And you've had experience. That's more what the show is about experience. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
It didn't always make me sick. The altitude going back to La Paz, but
Okay.
I remember there was a couple of times when I was like, okay, I'm gonna try something completely different, and this time I'm not gonna go hard, like, because I would land there and then that same day I would be walking in the streets, you know, and going out and about, and so then that one time I decided I'm gonna take it easy. I'm going to stay home. I'm not going to eat like anything like from the streets or whatever, which I love to do.
Yeah. That's a sacrifice. Man, to not do that. Yeah.
Yep. So you sacrifice those things. I was just drinking bottled water, and I didn't get sick. Like for 2 days, I didn't eat like a proper meal. I was just snacking and drinking water. And then by the third day, I think I was over it, and then I went about my business, and I was just fine. Not once I felt the altitude effect. But again, everybody's different.
Right.
Last time I went in August, I went with my son, and he was completely fine. And I was sick for like a week. So, you know, everyone's different.
Yeah. Do you think aging has something to do with it?
Aging, lifestyle,
Sure.
lots of things. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I think maybe the highest place I've been is probably Denver. Yeah, and I didn't get sick, but it's a different feeling. It's harder to sing and harder to like. I don't know how high Denver is, but
It's a mile, I think.
okay.
Well, at the airport they say Mile High City.
Oh, that ain't shit.
I remember
That's
laughing about it.
Yeah, that's only 5,000 feet. The thing is, it's probably less than a mile if they're saying a mile.
Right,
they're
right.
They're like saying that to advertise. So.
And they're proud about it.
Right. Boy. Fun fact, the official elevation of the city of Denver, according to Wikipedia, is 5,280 feet, exactly 1 mile.
But La Paz is a very chaotic city. If you ever venture over there, just expect chaos to the maximum exponent in terms of traffic, of people, cars, everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not Germany. Germany is more regular, I'm thinking, and organized, right?
Those would be the complete
opposite.
opposites.
Yeah. It's interesting that was your first experience. So the traffic then, is that dangerous?
If you're gonna go drive, yes.
Yeah.
I would say don't go drive right away. Go watch it. Go be a passenger.
Yeah. Sure.
Hold on to things.
Yeah.
But I learned how to drive over there. So when I drive in La Paz, it's always like an adventure.
Right.
Because I feel a little bit of adrenaline, like going back to when I learned how to drive. And then also just driving and seeing the different beautiful views and streets that we have.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking in terms of quality of the roads.
Right.
I'm talking just like plain views. Because
people and shops and that kind of thing, or like buildings,
or like landscapes.
Landscape.
Because, yeah. There's a lot of hills in the city.
Of course, I guess.
In different corners of the city, you always have like some very unique, cool view. Like because La Paz is like a whole. And on one side we have the mountain range, so you see the snowed peaks. And then on the other side we have the high desert, so it's like a highland that like covers like a wall.
Wow.
And so you can see from anywhere in the city, you can see really cool landscapes. But because it doesn't snow in the city officials don't really care about paving the roads or fixing them. Okay. I don't think like most roads have been fixed since I left.
Okay.
Like more than a decade ago.
Wow. Yeah.
So roads are really, really bad. Which I hope they would do something about it, because they've worked on other things. There's really nice parks and really beautiful areas, but driving can be a pain, literally and figuratively.
And you're saying there's a cultural difference between people who live in the mountains and people who live on the coast?
Right.
Yeah.
And not even in the coast, because we don't have a coast in Bolivia, but in the lowlands. Like if you go to the Amazon basin on the Bolivian side, which is 60% of the country, completely different culture, different accent, different kinds of music, different foods. So being from the Andes is very unique, and there's a lot of similarities with other Andean countries in South America, like Peru, Ecuador. I can hear that in the accents. I can hear it in the music.
Is it an urban versus rural thing, or are there large cities in the lowlands too? Just as many or more, or
there are large cities in the lowlands too,
okay.
and they can be actually even more developed than La Paz.
Right.
Like, I've heard really, I don't want to say good things, but things about high development in Santa Cruz, for example, which is now a city bigger than La Paz. They have like over 3 million people in Santa Cruz, so it's growing more,
Yeah.
But I hate the weather because it's hot and humid like Florida, so I would never live there.
Right. Are there more people there in the lowlands, like in general, or is the population distributed pretty evenly?
I think,
from what you know,
generally the population is concentrated around bigger cities. So I would say La Paz and Santa Cruz would be the biggest cities of the country, and they're like east and west.
Sure.
And because of that, there's rivalries and whatnot.
Yeah.
And Yeah, but I would say
You had
see,
colorful nicknames for each other?
yeah,
Okay.
to say the least.
Okay. I don't need to know what they are. But we're not about that on this show. But
No.
it gets me thinking.
But it's funny because you see that everywhere.
Of
you
course.
Know,
That's why I
see
can
it,
infer that. Yeah.
I see it here. It's like East, West, Mankato.
Yeah.
It's Midwest and other areas. And
Yeah,
it's
whatever our
everywhere.
neighboring state is, we have something to say about them, or like, I don't know why.
Yeah.
You know.
But if you leave the country and you found each other elsewhere, then you'd be friends,
Right. Right.
Because that happens too. When I was in Germany, I was celebrating Carnival in Cologne, and they have like a couple holidays, and it's just parades and people having fun and drinking everywhere. And we saw this group of guys, and the girl had this hat that said Bolivia on it, and so we automatically went and started talking to her.
Right.
And they ended up being from the east, from this city called Santa Cruz. And
Right.
and in Bolivia, we would have been fighting, but we were like, "Oh, let's go get some beers,"
Yeah. You just you're from Santa Cruz. No.
Yeah,
But,
we were just friends.
yeah.
It was
Of
interesting.
course. Yeah.
So those are the things that you value and that you learn when you leave your country or your area. And I've seen that in my son too, because when we came back, he was like, "I really like Minnesota. I really like the States."
Yeah.
And I'm like, good, because if you didn't go for a trip, then maybe you wouldn't value things the same way. And I think for me, there's also a value in the sense of being away from your comfort zone, because when you travel, you realize that people might do things in a way that's different than what you were used to, or people may say things in a different way, or people may dress in a different way. And I think all of those things add up to the tolerance fact, because if I'm not exposed to something, then I'm obviously going to be perhaps more protective of my own kind, or whatever, of the way I know things. But I think traveling and knowing that there's a world of possibilities about everything out there, then it keeps your mentality open, I think.
Sure. That does seem exciting to me. I don't know. Do you feel that excitement, like getting out of your comfort zone? And
Yes, it is exciting. I'm not as excited about the traveling aspect of it, because I'm sick of sitting for hours and having layovers, and
yeah,
I feel guilty about the pollution factor of traveling by airplane and whatnot. But besides all of those things, every time I find myself in a position of discomfort, or whatever you want to call it, then it's like, oh yeah, that's right. Like I'm traveling, like
Right.
I'm not in the same place where I was before.
Yeah.
And it's a different thing, and I like that. And not just about those things that you might be exposed day to day, but also problems, because when you're traveling, there's so many things that could go wrong.
Oh, sure.
On any day, and so you learn how to solve problems.
Yeah.
Like you get creative, and a lot of times you're forced to do that.
Yeah.
It's just part of the deal of traveling, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I imagine if you have like jet lag and altitude sickness, and you're encountering like all these things that are new to you, that you did not expect, that don't make sense, and that maybe you need to make sense out of, so you can eat or find a place to sleep, or like get back home or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, that is an adventure, probably in every sense.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
And even going back to your reality, because like it's happened to me before, where I go back to wherever my home was, and I'm going back to my routine, and then I go partying or whatever, and I drink, and then I wake up the next day, and it takes me a little while to remember like which country I'm in
Sure.
or what language I'm supposed to be talking. And
Sure.
and it's happened to me once where I couldn't remember where I was. Like it took me a little while. Like, I was like, oh wait, yeah, I'm in Minnesota. Like I'm speaking English.
Yeah.
It was weird.
That sounds like a good night. Yeah.
Must have been.
Yeah. Do you think you could overdo it? Do you think that because it's like you feel like you're in a rut if you don't get the experience of different places and different people? Like,
Over traveling?
yeah.
No.
No, you don't think so?
No, I could just be on the road,
Yeah.
like, as a home.
Okay. But what if there was a schedule that was imposed upon you where you had to like go here and then here and then here, like, and every day you were in a different country, like with a different language and
Well, yeah.
yeah, okay.
That would be different. Like,
Right.
yeah, if I'm sticking to somebody else's agenda, I might not enjoy it as well. But
Yeah.
thankfully, I've been able to travel where I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, just don't get that record deal where that they put you in a different country.
Send you wherever.
Yeah. It's-
Well, maybe the first couple of times.
yeah, do it for a little while.
Yeah.
Why not? But, yeah, or maybe you get a speaking tour or something. But yeah, you could talk to a lot of different people. I would think, you know.
As long as I don't have a lot of layovers, I'll be
Yeah.
okay.
Where do you want to go that you haven't gone?
I want to go to Nepal.
Yeah.
For some reason, I'm very interested in seeing the Himalayas and experiencing their food and their culture. But I would think that I want to learn a little bit of the language before I go,
Sure.
so that I can have a better experience.
Yeah.
So maybe in a few years
Yeah.
after I learn some Tamil or Nepali.
I keep somehow encountering Nepali people. Like when I lived in Minneapolis, I ended up in a band with two guys who were Nepali, and then also the Nepali student organization here in town. They had an open mic that I ended up going to.
Oh,
and like,
cool.
Yeah, and there's one guy that I
Nice.
do recording projects with sometimes.
Nice.
So it's just like it's always through music, but that's how I know everybody. So that's that's kind of a common theme, and no matter where you're from. But yeah, it's interesting. Like I never sought to know anything about the place, but like now I do, just because of all the experience I've had with people. And it's very much in the front of my mind, where I think probably a lot of people in the U.S. are like, "Where's that?" You know, they don't know. But yeah, I have a fascination with it now too, and I've had a lot of their food, and yeah, it's just it kind of blows my mind, like how I don't know if there's a lot of Nepali people in Minnesota somehow, or maybe it's just a coincidence that I've had that exposure. I don't know.
Yeah, I've had some Nepali friends here when I was in college as well, and they're always so nice and friendly, and I love that about cultures that are friendly too.
Sure, that might be part of it too. You know, just I suppose people who are friendly, I'd probably be more likely to meet them. It's more my style. Yeah. Do you find you have any personality traits that help you, like when you're traveling, like being friendly or like being inquisitive or curious, anything like that?
I think it helps me that I can be outgoing. I'm not always outgoing, but
Yeah.
I can be. And when I travel, it's useful because if I get lost, then I don't have a problem approaching anyone, and even if I kill the language, I'll attempt to communicate.
Right.
But I think that's helpful, and I'm also very empathetic because I notice when I see other people traveling and they're confused or lost, and it's happened a couple of times where I approach people and I say, "Hey, you look confused. Can I help with something?" And a lot of times, like I'm able to help because I've been in airports so much or
Sure.
whatever. But I would say, yeah, just being outgoing and empathetic helps. I'm also open and I like meeting people. So I would think that if you're not outgoing and if you don't like meeting people, then it might be tougher to enjoy a trip, like especially if you get in trouble or get lost or something. And,
Yeah.
it might be more stressful, but
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, just be open.
Are you an extrovert?
I think I'm a mix.
Okay.
Like I can be either one.
Yeah.
It depends on the context and how I'm feeling and
Sure.
how much sleep I had.
Sure.
Things like that.
Yeah. I always kind of thought that about the tests like that and personality assessments and stuff like that, like
Yeah.
labels. Your first language is Spanish, yeah?
hmm
And would you call English a second language, or what would you call it? It's your language that you speak daily now.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. People ask me if I think in English or Spanish, and I think it depends. Again, on the context and on other things. But I can think in either one. And
Yeah.
when I'm having a conversation, sometimes in Spanish, I'll drop some English, and I don't do it the other way. I think I've
Okay.
trained myself to speak English like more consistently, but
Yeah.
yeah, my English spills sometimes.
And you do radio in English and Spanish.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I enjoy that. I've thought about doing shows in other languages, and it's still a possibility for a future project, but so far I'm not focused on that.
Okay. And you're a citizen of the United States, yeah?
I'm dual, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
both,
Dual.
yeah.
Yeah. Because I think I was there when that happened. That would have been about 9-10 years ago, something like that.
It would have been about 10 years ago, yeah.
Is there a difference between being a citizen and not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, being a resident is what allows you to reside anywhere.
Right.
And usually residency gives you the right of a resident, but citizenship will give you the rights to vote, which is a right that I haven't exploited yet.
Oh, okay.
And
Get out there, man.
I haven't even exploited that in Bolivia, but yes, I will now.
Okay. Good. Good. We need. Well, it's just like, it's the influence everywhere. Like,
Yeah.
we're all people. I don't know how much difference it makes voting, but
No, I
do
know.
it. I do it.
Yeah. And yeah, it's crazy anyway.
Yeah.
So.
If anything, it makes a difference that I take a minute to look up the candidates. That's probably what makes more of a difference than the fact that I actually check a box or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that in my head now is like a little bit of knowledge about who this person is and what their policies have been, and what party they belong to, and maybe where they grew up or whatever I learn about them. So to me, that probably makes more of a difference actually than me voting. But I have to do that to vote because I'm not going to vote without doing that. So
Yeah, I was going to say.
Getting the I'm not a huge advocate for voting, but whatever. Getting the ballot at home really makes that more possible, because I get it mailed to me now, and then I sit down and I just look up the names real quick, and then I'm like, okay, I know who I want to vote for. It isn't like I'm super educated about it, but I can't really do that in the box, when I go to the place. So. And you can do it beforehand, but for some reason, for me, having the card in front of me and just looking up real quick, yeah, that to me seems to make the voting process more honest and what it's kind of supposed to be. But,
and I think sometimes or some places you can also write yourself in. Have you ever done that?
Have I written? I think I wrote in somebody once, the first time I voted. But I mean, I sort of do it strategically, so I'm not going to vote for someone who doesn't really have a chance.
Okay.
That's just how I approach it. So.
Oh, because I was going to vote for you. But.
Okay, you can do that. Yeah, you can do that.
Okay.
Vote for me for anything. I probably won't do it, man. I don't want more work.
You have my vote.
All right. I mean, I'm not going to try to stop you, but I might not take office even if I get elected. Yeah. So what are other differences between being a resident and being a citizen?
I think that's the only one.
Okay.
Yeah, and and being a resident, you have to renew it every so many years, depending the country you're in, and that involves paying fees and being a resident, becoming a resident or a tourist or a citizen involves a lot of money in this country.
Okay.
So, in a way, I find that not so good. But that's the world we live in because they don't want people to move to have better lives.
Is there anything else you want to say? I feel like we've covered a lot of ground. And
anything else I want to say?
I'm happy to talk more if you got more stuff.
I don't think so. I think,
Okay.
that was fun. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show.
Chatting.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Well, I'll talk to you again if we can set it up.
For sure.
Here's something that might interest listeners. I am looking for people to interview me about things that I don't do. I Don't Do That, the Ocho interviews, will air on a special members-only section of this podcast. If you're interested in a membership and getting access to that content, other content, and getting every episode a day early, please visit idon'tdothatpodcast.com/give. That's idon'tdothatpodcast.com/give. And if you would like to interview me, please contact me on my website, ochotunes.com. I'm also always looking for people with an interesting, heartfelt, or entertaining story about something they don't do. If you want to talk to me, please visit ochotunes.com/guest to apply to be a guest on our show. Maybe you know somebody. Have them apply. If you'd like to hear me interviewed about my spirituality, you'll want to check out the Finding Paradise podcast, episode 10, streaming now. Shout out to 108 Alchemy Art Shop and the GSR Fine Arts Festival of Mankato, Minnesota, both of whom have given me an opportunity to get on stage this winter, which is my slow season. It is nice to stay fresh. It is nice to have a sponsor like Primetime Web. It is nice to have my dudes, Doug, Jalotli, and Ian over for drum circles. I just went to the Wakanda Forever movie in the theater with my wife, Betty, last night. It was our first time going to a movie in 3 years, and it was amazing. Happy holidays, people. My name is Ocho. I'm your host, chief engineer, and producer. I also composed and performed the theme song. Thank you to our guest, Jose, for being free and open and moving around the world and telling us about it. Check him out on clandestinoradio.org, CLANDESTINO radio.org. It's like the word clandestine in English, but it's in Spanish, clandestinoradio.org. Learn some vocabulary. It's amazing. I have a hard time learning my own language. Hey, I have gotten a little bit of feedback that some of our episodes have been challenging to hear, and I think that's great. It's probably a sign that we're learning about each other. I want to thank all of you for all that you do and all that you don't do, and I will talk to you again if I'm lucky. I don't do that.